Time for another song review right here on Dr. Pundit, and it'll be one of two number one hits by the Doobie Brothers. Their first one, Black Water, which is my favorite. Let's get into it. Hey, I'm Michael Douglas. Welcome to Dr. Pundit, where we talk about music, not medicine. And on this edition of the show, it's time for another song review. This time, the first number one hit by a California Bay Area band who captured listeners' hearts by a harder rock blues sound in the early 70s, but switched to a more urbane yacht rock sound by the end of the decade. I'm talking about the Doobie Brothers and the song Black Water. You know, there's something fascinating about a rock band. Imagining a world where rock and roll has even yet to exist. That song is Black Water by the Doobie Brothers, a Californian band's blissed out reverie about an imagined South, a place where you can drift a raft down the Mississippi River and then go to hear some pretty funky Dixieland. And like Creedence Clearwater Revival, another Bay Area rock band in the era, late 60s, early 70s, the Doobie Brothers felt a longing for a version of an Americana that they really never actually experienced. But Creedence Clearwater Revival, who came out a few years earlier and who never hit number one, despite getting close 3 or 4 times, found grit and fire in those lyrics and in that Southern aesthetic. And it worked for the Doobie Brothers. And for the Doobie Brothers, this pre-rock and roll wonderland was a lazy, beautiful, idyllic foundation for those songs. Tom Johnston, the lead Doobie brother, wrote and sang most of the band's songs, but Black Water came from guitarist Patrick Simmons, who also sang lead on it. Now, Simmons, who'd been raised in San Jose, was a bluegrass guy before he became a Doobie brother, and Black Water is his idealized vision of New Orleans and of Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer. It's a shallow and romantic portrait of a region. And on Black Water, Simmons sings about the South as a place where time slows down, where poverty and racism never quite enter the picture. And if you wanted to find some white on black fetishization in the song Black Water, you wouldn't have to look too hard. And whether Simmons is singing of the river, catfish are jumping, that paddle will thumping, or of the city, just take the streetcar that's going uptown. He's really thinking of mythic terms, and musically, Black Water is nothing like Olivia Newton-John's Have You Never Been Mellow. That's the song that replaced Black Water at number one in the spring of '75. But, philosophically, it's perfectly aligned with the Olivia Newton-John hit. I ain't got no worries, 'cause I ain't in no hurry at all. Simmons recorded Black Water solo, playing acoustic guitar along with a primitive drum machine, and producer Ted Templeman overdubbed the rest of the band later within the track. And somehow it all sounds organic, loose, and pleasingly sloppy and impromptu. The arrangement is rich and detailed, but it's not overproduced. I guess that's what makes it sound so likable and such a great number one track. Acoustic guitars weave in and out of each other in the track as easy as the lyrics flow from verse to chorus in the song. Jeff Skunk Baxter, the Steely Dan sideman who'd become a full-time Doobie brother, plays slide guitar, getting into a nice little call and response with the viola player and future Prince collaborator Novi Novog. And the song opens with sounds of wind chimes, and the song slowly becomes fuller and louder like a party you're slowly walking toward and hoping that you can get in and take part in. Patrick Simmons' lead vocal has a Louisiana swamp feel of earlier Doobie Brothers tracks like Toulouse Street and Black-Eyed Cajun Woman, 2 tracks that come to mind. And the song is about the Mississippi River with lyrics that were likely inspired, as I said before, by Mark Twain's Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer, each of which tell stories about rafting down the Mississippi River. Black Water wasn't seen as having hit potential, and believe it or not, in the spring of 1974, about a year before it hit number one, It was issued as a B-side to a track called Another Park, Another Sunday, and I don't think I've ever heard that song. So in November of 1974, it was reissued as an A-side and took about 6 months to get to number one. In an online interview, Tom Johnston, the Doobie Brothers frontman, explained how the song became an unlikely hit. That's a story that could have happened back then, but never would ever happen now. Roanoke, Virginia picked that tune up and started playing it in heavy rotation. And somebody in Minneapolis, who I guess I knew somebody in Roanoke, heard the song and decided to follow suit. And it ended up becoming our first number one single. That was Pat's single. And oddly enough, it was never looked at as a single by the record company. I remember when I first heard it was number one. We were in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and we were just getting ready to go on stage. And then I guess Bruce must have told us, I think we were already aware of the fact that it was getting airplay, but nobody was really paying a lot of attention to it. And then all of a sudden it became number one and we were all paying attention. I remember I went in and congratulated Pat backstage, and we've been playing it ever since. The band lost lead singer Tom Johnston to an illness in 1975, but found a capable replacement in Michael McDonald, who was with them until their split in 1982 when he went off as a solo artist. And when they regrouped 6 years later, Johnston took over as frontman. The Doobie Brothers were one of the few bands with hits sung by 3 different singers, Johnston, McDonald, and thanks to Black Water, Patrick Simmons. But the Doobies adapted, becoming one of those rare bands to switch frontmen without losing stride when they replaced Johnston with Michael McDonald and remade themselves as White Soul Ramblers. And later, Yacht Rock Pioneers, well, the group was basically in store for their second great coming as an act. Now, here's a fun fact. The Doobie Brothers performed Black Water in a 1978 episode of the TV show What's Happening. And I think I remember that episode where Rerun decides he's going to take a personal tape recorder into the concert and hide it underneath a trench coat and record it. And all of a sudden, when they're up and dancing to the music, it falls out on the floor. And just before they go to a commercial break, everybody's looking around each other like, what did you just do? You bootlegged this concert. Quaint times. And I think that's when I really heard of the group for the first time. I was about 10 years old, and What's Happening was a very popular show among teens and preteens like myself at the time. And they sounded really cool. So by the time I got into them, they were into their 1979 album with Michael McDonald called Minute by Minute. And of course, that second part of the group's career was about to kick off in a big way and was still, they were very successful, but they were about to reach megastardom with that classic album at the end of the decade. I'm Michael Douglas, and if you like what you see here on the show, Dr. Pundit, please don't hesitate to like and subscribe. And as the late, great Barry White always used to say, let the music play, and I'll see you on the next episode.